please stand and help me recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to get started with, first before I get started, under agenda focus, paragraph 3, I'm going to go ahead and strike FY17 budget presentation. We're just going to push that into
Next week.
next week.
Is next week the 22nd?
No, so
Go ahead, Dr.
typically this is when we do the UCOA and where the money comes from in our workshop every year. So we're going to just move it down to the budget subcommittee. The budget subcommittee approves our budget before it goes before the full committee.
Right, that's why I was saying, we're not doing it, we're doing it at the business meeting in February. This isn't the business meeting.
No, so typically the presentation was just how we build the budget, the trends over it. There was no vote tonight for the full committee at the workshop. No vote.
But we have, oh, all right. Well, I just want it off the agenda.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have,
Yeah, go ahead.
so at the budget meeting after this workshop, we're going to be talking and the budget committee will be voting on it at that time. Is that correct?
That's correct, and then you'll be getting a booklet. Well, I'll tell you then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then we'll do a final vote at the end of February
Okay.
on business meeting. Okay, so going back to the agenda, we'll start with public comment. I've got one from the audience.
Hi, my name's Jacqueline Katie. I'm a first-year teacher here in the district, and it was recently recommended that my contract is terminated. So I'm just here to show you that I really do care about my job. I'm giving you some information that I feel is relevant to my position.
All right.
Should I leave the extras for people that are?
Yes.
Yeah, you can.
Thank you.
There's one.
Thank you. So the first thing that's in everybody's folder is a letter that I wrote to all of you explaining my position here. I'm a first-year teacher in the district, and I feel like I've been working really hard. It was just made known to me on February 4th that it was going to be recommended that my contract is terminated at the end of the year. I was very surprised to hear that. I've only had 2 observations so far. I actually have block scheduling, which is different than the other 2 8th grade math teachers. And the 3 main reasons that my principal told me they were terminating the contract for were that he observed direct instruction rather than more student-centered inquiry learning, that I was falling behind in curriculum, and that my questioning skills weren't quite up to par. So I actually, like I said, teach block scheduling. So for 90 minutes, my entire class period meets, and on both observations, Principal Vance only stayed for 45 minutes of that. Both observations were also on the first day of a new topic, and I'm also, like it said, falling slightly behind in curriculum for a number of reasons. So to catch up, direct instruction is almost a little bit necessary at the beginning of a topic. I'm working with him and I'm making a plan to show whatever it is that I need to show for improvement. I'm making a plan to observe other teachers, to talk to other teachers about questioning skills and get feedback from them. And I also plan to have my mentor observe me and give me feedback on as regular of a basis that works for her. So I have a plan in place. I've talked to the other 8th grade math teachers, and we have a plan so that I'm getting caught up in curriculum. But I really want it known that I care about my job. I really care about my students. Their performance was another reason why I feel like I was falling a little bit behind. They were showing me that they needed a little bit more practice in order to master the skills, and I gave that time. And Principal Vance even mentioned that teaching a block schedule is not really comparable to teaching a standard schedule where you see students every day. He mentioned himself that meeting for 90 minutes every other day is kind of like meeting for a period and a half of my colleagues who see their students for 45 minutes each day. Reasons being for that is that they have time, 45 minutes in class, plus they have extra time where their students are able to practice and master those skills at home for homework. Whereas in order for me to move on to the next topic, I need to practice those skills in my class before I can move on to that next topic. So those are some of the reasons why I'm here today. I'm working hard at school till almost 5 or 6 o'clock almost every night. I'm preparing resources because I have a limited amount of resources right now. I haven't been given a textbook at the beginning of the year. The real 2 resources that I've talked about that I was given at the beginning of the year were a scope and sequence and curriculum guide, or sorry, a content guide. They actually differ slightly. The scope and sequence, I believe, was made in 2013, and it hasn't been updated since. The guide that I'm going by is similar to the scope and sequence, but not quite the same. It's been changed since the beginning of the year. I was told to use the guide as the order of what I would be covering topics in, and the scope and sequence as more of how far in depth I'd be going in topics, which is still relatively vague. Another reason why I think I'm falling behind in curriculum is because a lot of the time my biggest questions are how far in depth is it that I need to go into a topic? So I need to be going to those colleagues of mine in order to figure out exactly how far in depth I need to be going. I'm coming from a high school background. I have some experience in high school, and sometimes I feel like maybe I'm covering a little bit more than I should. I feel like if I had a textbook or more resources, then that would eliminate that problem. So of my 2 observations, I was hit pretty hard my first one. This is my 4th year teaching, and those scores were definitely the lowest I've seen so far. It was a shock to me to see all of that, but I have to admit that it was not my best observation. I was pretty nervous. I have one student in particular that is frequently throwing something different into the mix every single day. So rather than a student-centered inquiry type lesson, I was doing a lesson that was on transformations, and it was the first day of a topic, and we did kind of like an I do, we do, you do type of lesson. So the first half was a lot of support from my end, where we were on the projector, I was trying one, we were doing one together, and then I'd walk around and help students as they tried another one themselves. But the second half of the lesson was totally students working independently in pairs, by themselves and with their partner, working on transformations. And Mr. Vance didn't see that half. So I also was a little, I brought that up in our post-conference meeting, but because he didn't see it, it wasn't included in my evaluation. My second observation showed a lot of improvement. He was able to see more of that interaction with me and students interacting together and having conversations that were what he was looking for. The students were talking to each other, and that's really what he wanted to see. So if you look at my evaluations, my second evaluation, I scored all 3s, showing that I'm meeting their standards and I'm showing to be an effective teacher. So I already have shown improvement. Principal Vance also made a couple comments in there saying that I had showed improvement on some of the things that he had asked me to improve on the first evaluation. And I'm still working towards improving. there's a plan in place, as I've already talked about, and I'm doing what I can to improve so that I can hopefully keep my job. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any questions or? No? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move further into the agenda, going to agenda focus, superintendent goals and presentation. This is a separate discussion. Let's just go on with the agenda. I'll take that.
I appreciate it, Mr. Benson. Thank you. Tonight is just an opportunity for me to update the committee on my goals, and I think it's a great segue into diving a little deeper into the new superintendent's evaluation tool. So my goal this year, and the purpose of tonight, is just to provide you with an overall update of my goals and orientate you with the new evaluation tool. Over the last 6 years, you've heard me talk about and really preach about the characteristics of a professional learning community. And so that's where you can see this new evaluation tool talking about leadership. And it's not so much what the matrix is that's quantitative, but really the qualitative. And so as we go through it tonight, I want to really have you think about it from a perspective of what is a PLC. So within a PLC, we hope over the last six years, in the last 2 years that I've been the superintendent, a year and a half at this point, that we have a shared mission, vision, and goals. So essentially, in Lynn's heard me say this in almost every meeting, what are our 4 essential questions? What do we want all the children to know and be able to do? How are we going to measure it? What are we going to do when the students don't get it? And what are we going to do when they do get it and they're already at that grade level? So that's kind of our shared mission, vision, and goals, and everything throughout this document around instruction, we should be asking that question. I think I've had enough conversations with Pauline over the past that when we ask for moving or transferring money around, she'll ask that question. How does it relate to the students? So I think we do have that shared mission and vision, and then she brings it right back to every aspect that in our organization goes back to those 4 essential questions and why are we doing what we do. The second component of characteristics in PLCs is working in collaborative teams. So routinely I say we should make every decision students first, educators are our greatest resource, and then continuous improvement. And educators being our greatest resource is when they work in teams. They can't work in isolation. So we have a lot of conversations about what does common planning time look like, what do we do in department chair meetings. We have digital learning teams. It's that collective brain work together that we really want to shape our culture in this building. You can see that in the organization. in this evaluation tool. The third characteristic of our PLC is collective inquiry. So what's our action research? So the last couple of years, we've been talking about our academic return on investment. What's the action research that we're going to do, and how do we know together we're asking the right questions? So again, we want to move the organization forward, and not just one teacher or one student at a time. So we need to go back to what is that shared mission and vision, where are we going, and then are we creating that culture? So together we're asking those right questions. The fourth characteristic is what I just alluded to a little bit, is action, research, and orientation. We must get better in the educational field of collecting research, or getting to the end. As you know, many of you have been on the school committee for many, many years, and you'll hear a lot of initiatives coming up. We want to try this new approach. We want to try this. And then 2 years later, Mrs. McBride would say, is that working? And typically, the superintendent will probably say, I don't know. We bought it and we don't measure it. So we really want to get back into it, and I'll highlight a couple instances that we're doing it in our district around that action research. What's our essential question? What are we trying to prove? What's our progress monitored? And do we get our intended results? So again, we're changing that culture of, if you want something, what are you going to do? What are you going to measure? And did you get your intended results? And sometimes it's just to fail quickly. This is what we want to do. We figure out in a month that it's not working, and then we abandon it and go in a different direction. But again, it is that mindset of moving teachers to say, we're going to measure what we think is important. Unfortunately, this is a concept that, even going back to 2010, is part of the educator evaluation tool. It's student learning objectives. It's really action research. Unfortunately, I think it was rolled into, this is your evaluation, we're going to tell you if you're right or wrong, as opposed to, this is what I'm going to try, this is how I'm going to progress monitor it, and this is how students are going to grow, or if they're not growing, I'm going to stop doing that. So that's the culture we want to create. The other one, and I say it all the time, is continuous improvement. We're a great district, but we can get better. And every day we need to have that mindset of how do we do to improve. I look at my 3 administrators over here, and I don't think they can get any better, but every day I push them to say how do we get better, and they research ways. I think we have 14 years of clean audits. Leslie's going to be actually invited to Wisconsin to be on a national panel again on some of the work that she's doing. So Leslie and Mary has been highlighted throughout the state too. They're trying to be innovative and get better. And I think in Bristol we're not complacent. So we want to, in every classroom, every kind of conversation, we want to look at that continuous improvement. And then the last one is results oriented. We're just not going to do something without saying, what's the intended outcome? How are we going to improve? And we need to get to that mindset, as opposed to, we're going to try it, and we need to know what our end target is and what our outcomes are going to be. So that's a PLC that we've really been developing since 2009 when I was the assistant superintendent. I think we get better, or we're getting better in the last 2 years, because I think we're buying in. A lot of them race to the top initiatives with dying off, and we're getting back to culture around, again, those 4 central questions. What do we want all students to know and be able to do? How are we going to measure it? What are we going to do if students need help? And what are we going to do if the students are already there? So that's a PLC. And then the other district initiative that we've been working on for the last 3 years is a work around.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted and I'm not quite following. Can you, I mean, I don't want you to go through all that over again, but I missed the first sentence or something, because I understand that you're trying to go through what PLCs are, but I'm not understanding why, because I don't know which paper. Are you referring to your theory of action and goals, or your superintendent evaluation, or you're on another topic altogether? Not
there yet. So I just wanted, through when I think we get to the evaluation tool itself, is to have that mindset around, is the superintendent creating a PLC? So when you look at domain 1 around instruction, can we look at the instruction domain of how I'm pushing our teachers and our administrators to get better instructional practices, better assessment practices, does that relate back to our shared mission and vision? So I want us to have that mindset on what's the culture we're trying to create here, and then we can go through the tool to see if there's any kind of correlation. So I haven't gotten into the tool yet.
And so PLC is,
A professional learning community.
you keep mentioning culture, and I keep saying, why is, okay.
Yeah. So I won't go back over there's 6 tenets.
I got all of
So-
them, I was trying to understand their context.
Yeah, so that's why I just more the framework, because when we go into the evaluation tool, it does not specifically say we're going to increase POC scores by 5% or we're going to increase AP scores. It's really about leadership moves. So I want us to really think about what's my vision of where we're going, and then what's that PLC I'm trying to create. And then I think this tool actually makes a little more sense. So that's our PLC and some of the tenets. And then the other initiative that we've been working really hard on has been our assessment literacy. And this goes into that first kind of domain, again, around instruction and assessment. And through our assessment literacy, we're having a lot more conversations about, in every classroom, are there clear learning targets for teachers and students? Do they own them? Are we empowering students to know what their roadmap is through owning their learning targets? The second instructional strategy that we're really focused on, the teachers give students models of strong work and weak work, so that they know what proficiency means. So if they have a rubric in front of them that's a 1 through 5 or 1 through 4, they know what a 5 looks like and they know what a 2 looks like, so that students can start self-evaluating. So that's really important that we see in a lot of classrooms. The third instructional strategy that we've been really honing in on is, do teachers and educators or administrators, superintendents and building principals, do I give them descriptive feedback? So we're moving away from the attaboys to, Mrs. Campbell, I like the way that you did X. I like the way that you used transition words as opposed to nice job, and then walking away. So we really want to use descriptive feedback when we're giving, when we're talking to our students or our administrators or our teachers. And then the fourth instructional strategy is that students feel safe to make a mistake. Same thing with teachers. It's a safe learning environment. We want them to take a risk. So we look to see that in every classroom, pre-K through 12. I look to see it in my admin meetings that principals aren't afraid to speak up and say, this is what I think, and then it's a safe environment where they're not saying, the superintendent's at the end of the table, he thinks I'm stupid for saying X. So I want them to feel safe as well, and that's part of the modeling. So I went over those 10 tenets really pretty quickly around what's a PLC and the assessment literacy, because I think this framework allows the district to have a loose, tight relationship. So those are the things I expect to see in every classroom. How it happens at Mount Hope or Colt Andrews might look a little differently, because their students are different, they're at different ages, they might have different priorities when they look at their POC assessment, but I expect teachers working together. I expect a culture that's results-oriented, that they have a shared mission and vision, that they use those 4 instructional strategies. So really loose, and I expect those 10 things happen in every classroom. But Colt Andrews today was working on responsive classrooms, and I went to Hugh Cole, and they were working on a science unit. They owned their work, but they had the right essential questions. So that's the loose, tight relationship. These 10 things between the PLC and the assessment literacy provides clarity and coherence. So are we clear? Am I clear in my expectations to my building principals? And are the building principals clear in their expectations to teachers? And the teachers clear in their expectations to students, so on and so forth? And then the other one is coherence. How do all the district's initiatives come together? And I go back to those 4 essential questions. What do we want all kids to know and be able to do? How are we going to measure it? What are we going to do to intervene? And what are we going to do to accelerate if they already get it? And then if we have clarity and coherence, I firmly believe that it empowers all educators and students to be empowered through creating a sense of ownership, and it cultivates individual and collective knowledge, skills, and execution of plans. So that's kind of the overview, I think, of where we're going and looking at this evaluation tool. So I'm going to move into the evaluation tool, if you guys don't mind, and just kind of give some brief examples of how I see some of the connections. I don't want to...
I'm sorry again to keep
Yep.
interrupting, because the agenda says the evaluation, your superintendent goals presentation. So is that, are we, I'm not seeing the segue here, but,
So I did not rate myself, right? So if I'm red, yellow, and green.
right, I
So-
understand that.
So it's an update on these areas, the work that I have been doing, so it would be an update of my goals. So, for example, standard 1 is around instructional leadership,
Yeah,
which is the goal around student achievement and communication.
okay.
And so in there, then we could look at indicator 1. So standard 1 for the general audience is around the educational leader promotes learning and growth of all students and the success of all staff by cultivating a shared vision and makes powerful teaching and learning the central focus of school. So that's my goal around student achievement and then communication, and then it goes back to that PLC. Yep.
I don't know what paper you're looking at, but I'm not, I'm trying to follow,
Yep.
I'm having a hard time doing that, because you're either, I don't know what page you're on. I have in front of me the student superintendent's rubric, the standards, is that the one you're?
I'm on page 2. Yep.
The standards,
Standard 1,
sorry, standard 1,
instructional leadership.
okay, all right, I get it. I'm sorry to be dense,
No,
but
yeah, that's okay.
it's hard when you don't have
Yeah.
a present, something up in the front so that we can match where we're going,
No,
and
it's-
they can't see through the podium.
Yeah. So that's where, just on this page, just a quick crosswalk around the student achievement.
Mario, could I ask you one more
Sure.
question? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Maybe it's my eyes. But is 3 highlighted in all of these?
I didn't highlight anything, but 3 is
Yes, it
proficient.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is it my eyes or is the print
It's
highlighted?
highlighted, it's bolded, yes.
I did not highlight it. I did not rate myself. It's just a copy that probably came through.
Okay.
Yeah, that looks bolded.
You're efficient.
Yeah.
I apologize, but
Yeah. That's okay.
Mine's not.
I'm following you so
Yeah,
far. I
yeah.
just saw it highlighted.
I'm hoping that it's all 3s or higher. I guess that's the subtle message. So that's where, just kind of walking through this tool, again, going back to that, the tenets of a PLC, that you can see with those 4 essential questions. If you looked at standards-based unit design or lesson development support, I think you could see where my vision actually ties into, am I providing support and assistance for administrators? And I can say through our assessment literacy professional development, our ELA professional development, that our administrators are getting that support. All our administrators write student learning objectives. I meet with the building principals on a monthly basis, so they provide evidence on how they're providing teachers with their support. So again, that's the evidence I could drill deeper into. But I just want to go into a couple examples of where the goals kind of go back into this evaluation, but not getting really deep into the evidence. We can have individual kind of conversations so that if you have questions around this tool, that it'll be easier to rate. But, Karen?
When we had this discussion when we were working on this tool that Diana found for us, one of the things, and I don't know if this explains it a little bit better to the rest of the people who weren't in that subcommittee meeting, was that this tool was going to align to your goals, and you were going to come before us and talk about, because there are times we discussed that you would say, well, how would you know that in working on this, like that's not something that you would necessarily know about. So we wanted you to come before us, which you are doing right now, to talk about some of those things, to let us be aware of some of the things that we may not know that you're doing when we're doing our evaluation. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I don't know if that makes it any clearer.
So that's where we're not going through the 20 pages of this. I just wanted, where the goals do overlap, and then some evidence that we do. And some of the evidence actually overlaps between different indicators. So again, back to just standard one, which is A2, page 2. You know, we do the assessment literacy and then our admin SLOs. If we go quickly on page 3, around instruction, ensure that practices in all settings reflect high expectations.
Our pages aren't numbered, or mine
Are they down? Oh, sorry. I have it down at the bottom.
So what,
So it's indicator 1B.
1B, okay.
Oh, that's our 5 of 21.
Okay. So that's page 3 for me. I'm sorry.
Okay. Maybe
So-
that's what everyone was.
Yeah. So indicator 1B, just quickly, some evidence that I would present to you. Our administrators all do learning walks. So actually, at our next admin meeting, they'll be presenting their data that each administrator did 20 learning walks around what does instruction look like in their classroom. We'll review that data. We're making I can make a good assumption right now that our data is going to say that there's low level of questioning in our classrooms. Low level of student engagement. So those two will be ready to write our Title II grant, which is around professional development, and will focus on instructional strategies around questioning. So we do learning walks. Again, we go back to our assessment literacy and those 4 essential questions, the clear learning targets, models of strong and weak work. So that's indicator 1B. 1C, just some evidence. This is goal around, again, student achievement. Evidence that I would present are, we just had, for example, we had a benchmark, a task validation session at the high school. It was in one of my reports that we had visitors from around the state, from RIDE. We had the National Principal of the Year actually observing the work around calibrating our assessments, calibrating our rubrics. Again, we review our learning walk data here. This year, we're actually expanding PSAT from 10th grade. We're testing all 10th grade students and 11th grade students in PSAT to prepare them for the 11th graders for the SAT, which the government is actually going to be paying for this year and hopefully in the future. So that's some of the evidence where we're actually having a variety of assessments. We also have our comprehensive assessment system that's in place that Mary, Leslie, and our other administrators go through that data on a routine basis and present that to building administrators, to our teachers, at faculty meetings, or during comment time. Is there a question, Ms. Campbell? I just, I'm sorry. No?
Oh, I'm sorry.
What does low level mean?
Basic recall questions. What year did this happen? Who said this? So it's just basic recall type questions. So it's not really engaging. There's not an analysis of information. It's not synthesizing information. But it's real basic. What's the definition of X? So to me, that's a low-level question. While it's important, it shouldn't dominate the kind of conversation.
Thank you.
So that's 1C. 1D, again, this goal aligns to the goal around student achievement, college and career readiness. Evidence that I would present to you here, again, is my monthly meetings with my administrations, and my observations of the faculty meetings that I go to. So that's indicator 1. 1E, the goal would be around student achievement. Again, what data are we looking at? There's a plethora of data. So we have our POC data, our STAR data, our MAP data. We have teachers doing a book club. Other evidence in here of moving forward with the school and district goals is our strategic planning work that we were involved with, that you'll be receiving, hopefully approving in March. We have a Future Ready project that's going on. Ms. Campbell is involved with that. Shameless plug that will be recognized on the national stage tomorrow, Digital Learning Day. So we'll be highlighted for some of the videos we created and the action research our DLT team is doing. So we were recognized by the US DOE and then the Department of Education, but on a national level, when the conversation goes, how are schools engaging in digital learning, Bristol Warren will be highlighted on the national level. So great work happening there. So that's 1E. And then we get into Standard 2, which is around management and operations. This goal is around operational efficiencies, and things that I do on a yearly basis is I review all our safety plans. I meet with both police departments. We do tours of the schools to make sure that there's a safety walkthrough, that we meet all their recommendations. We write a review policy. I make sure that we execute and implement all the district policy. And then our operational systems, again, meeting with the building administration on a monthly basis. I meet with Pauline and George on a monthly basis to make sure everything we need at the building level is satisfied. And then indicator 2B, again, this is around human resources. We have, a few years ago, we implemented the human capital policy, and that's been a great policy. It actually helped us in our negotiations. We were able to write policy into this contract around being able to lay off in a different fashion, reassign teachers in a different fashion, so that was great. Also in the recruitment process or the hiring process, I meet with every new hire, even the one that was standing before us, to go over what's our district goals and expectations. And then I am in the last rows of, after I meet with every district hire, about 6 months into the school year, I meet with all the educators again to make sure that they're getting the supports they needed. Through a mentoring program, to partner chairs, teacher leaders, administrators, their colleagues. So I make sure that they're getting enough staff. I've had enough support through our staff, and I've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years. We get rave reviews. The teachers say that they feel very supported. A lot of that their colleagues are reaching out to them, whether it's their department chairs. The middle school and high school have, I'll be honest with you, have a much more formal process because they have department chairs or teacher leaders and they work on teams. It's a little more difficult at the elementary when we hire a new music teacher that travels between 2 or 3 buildings. They don't have a sense of community, so we work a little harder with them. But overall, our new hires feel grateful to meet with the superintendent and the assistant superintendent at the beginning of the year before they're hired. And then 6 months in, I meet with every teacher again to make sure they're doing well. Teachers that have been in the district for about 5 years come up to me and say that that's made a difference. That doesn't happen in other districts where the superintendent takes the time to meet with the teacher and make sure they're doing well. So I think we retained a lot of teachers in the last 3 or 4 years through that practice of just having that personal conversation. Essentially making sure they're surviving. I think the research is 75% of first-year teachers leave the profession. So I think we retain our highest quality teachers, and there's other teachers that we don't think are at A- or better that we ask, or I make a recommendation to you saying that I think we can find better. And we don't make those decisions lightly. So that's a little bit about recruitment and the induction process. So from my level, I model the importance of meeting with our teachers, having conversations to see what's being successful, what are obstacles, and hopefully provide more support if they need them.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do those meetings come about? Is it before school, is it after school, is it during school, when the class is in session? How does that work?
It depends. It's not when they're teaching. So I met teachers on their lunch break, before school, after school, whatever's convenient to them. I'm meeting with a teacher tomorrow during her lunch in my office because she's actually doing PD in the building. I met teachers at 4:30 at their school, but I think it's important enough to schedule my day around when they're available. So it's been really productive. You learn a lot of what they're struggling. It's been almost 20 years since I've been a first-year teacher and how it feels. So it's nice from the superintendent to get input from them of what's working and what's not working. And they get really nervous around this time of year when the superintendent wants a meeting with the first-year teacher. They assume they're getting fired. That's not the case, or do I need a union rep? So because I've been doing this for a number of years now, like the second, third, and fourth-year teachers like, oh, Mario's calling, he just wants to see how you do it, don't worry about it. So the culture has kind of changed about that. But it is nerve-wracking. The teachers have been open and made great suggestions on how to improve our mentoring system. So it's really nice. So indicated 2C, again, I don't want to go through every page, a lot of it, but going back to how do we create those PLCs. This one I just want to spend a couple minutes on. What I noticed, again, we hear a lot about school empowerment that the commissioner is putting out. From the district level, we've been trying to empower our teachers a lot, and our principals, to create that sense of ownership. So again, that's that loose, tight relationship where from a district level, I want to empower our principals. Where do they need to bring their schools? What's their sense of ownership so that they can move and drive change in their school. Sometimes when it comes from the superintendent's level saying, Mount Hope must do this, they don't own that plan. And so as soon as they meet any kind of adversity, what do? Well, that was Mario's plan. I told you it wasn't going to work. So really through the school improvement team, through focus groups, I want our principals and teachers to come up. How are they going to improve Mount Hope? How are they going to improve Rockwell? How are they going to improve Hugh Cole? Because it's the same moves. What's your shared mission and vision? What's your progress monitoring? How are you going to know what's the action research? And do they meet their results? So whether it's through a math focus or a reading focus, if they're committed for more student engagement, that school's going to grow. So it's that collective inquiry, moving in the right direction. It's that shared mission and vision. So that's why I want to loose tight. And from my perspective, I am not going to tell Mount Hope, you need to improve your business department when Mount Hope is telling me we need to improve our math department. So again, and that creates ownership. I'm just using that example. Using that, I also support the administrators. We increased to 2 admin meetings a month. One is a school-based focus. So when we come to Mount Hope, Don Rebello and his admin team needs to come up with, this is our goal at Mount Hope. They need to share their goal with the administrative team. What are their successes and what are their problems or obstacles? And then our admin team looks for evidence in the building, and we come back and make recommendations for Mount Hope on how we think we can help them, or we recommend or we commend them on what we thought was good. So again, it's that sense of ownership back at the building level, so that Don Rebello, Tara McAuliffe, it's their goals, it's not Mario's goals, and they become more engaged in that process. And we increased to 2 admin meetings a month. One is building-based, and one is the nuts and bolts. That's when we do a lot of the talking, because the district initiatives, these are the things we expect you to do. And both meetings are about an hour and a half, so we keep them really short. And then we reinforce clarity and coherence. How does everything kind of come together? So it's been hard for our building principals, I'll tell you honestly. They're used to a culture of from top down, State Street said this. And so then they can kind of sit back and say, what are your goals? And now it's really from State Street saying, building, what's your goals and how can I support you? And I think we're making progress. Mr. Saviano?
Yes, thank you. So obviously you must believe in site-based leadership.
I do. I think there's we have to be careful with that, because also with site-based, I think it's site-based leadership. What's really tricky is if you go all the way to site-based management, they really don't control much of their budget. So if you ask Pauline how much discretionary funds are at Rockwell, it's very, very, very small. And so I think that's really, they don't control a lot of their budget. And I think we need to talk through what would that look like, what would a thin contract look like. So there's still a lot of constraints on the site-based management that the commissioner, I think, is pushing forward. So, but I believe that they should own their mission and vision, and make some of those decisions so that it's not always from the top.
Would that include hiring and firing?
So in this district, they make the recommendations to me. Quite honestly, it is site-based management, and whether it's hiring or terminating a teacher. I don't do that in isolation. I ask for building principals, when they interview for a reading specialist at the elementary level, our principals are making those recommendations to me, and then I'll do a second interview to either confirm or negate their recommendations. And the same thing with termination. So our building principals are heavily involved with hiring and firing. What's a little more difficult now, and I think we have policy going forward, is about transfers. We have little control over who transfers into your district, into your building, if there's an opening, especially between elementary schools. That's a different kind of conversation, but I think our principals do have a lot of control over hiring and firing.
Thank you. Mario, can I ask you one more question? When I came on this school committee 40 years ago, what's it, 45? Every school was doing their own thing. And it was very hard if you had to move, even if you had to move between schools within the district. They worked very hard to have a standardized curriculum across the spectrum, particularly at the elementary school level. So I live in Bristol and I have to move to Warren, or I live in one section and I have to move to another school that not much is lost. What happens with the management if that, with that in mind?
So I think we still have that. So we still have a district curriculum. So that goes back to what do we want all students to know and be able to do. So right across all elementaries, and it's more at the elementary level, all fourth graders should know and be able to do these 5 things. So that's the non-negotiable. How it's, some instruction might look different depending on the students in front of them. So there's not a program per se, but you could go from Colt Andrews to Hugh Cole, or Hugh Cole to Rockwell, and you'll have the same curriculum, and they should be at the same pace. But it might be that ownership on what does tech integration look like with some instructional strategies. What are they owning? Are they focused on more RTI or STEM? But the curriculum is essentially the same. The instructional strategies and engagement might look a little different depending on the kids.
I just wanted to make sure on that one.
Yep, absolutely. So I know this is going to be a late or a long presentation. I don't want to go through every page, but that's some of the evidence, again, that if you look through these lenses, through my weekly reports or the lens of a PLC in the assessment literacy, I think you can see some of the leadership that I've bestowed in the district. And then you're able to evaluate me about providing resources around the goals around communication, and just looking at standard 3, just family and community conversation, engagement, and some things that happened this year that you might not be aware of around family engagement, and through Mary's office that we hired a Title I and a Title III coordinator that's really about family engagement to our most needy families. And then around community and business engagement, as you know, that we really, Mrs. McBride was there the other night, we're really looking at apprenticeships. I've been working with the East Bay Chamber of Commerce, I've been working with the Bristol EDC. They've Bristol Warren Ed Foundation on community engagement. How do we reimagine schools? And how do we get our apprenticeship running? So that's evidence that's behind the scene that you won't actually see in the goals per se. It's typically in my school weekly reports, or just some of those activities that happen on a daily basis. But hopefully collectively that you can use some of that information to go back into this tool to give me recommendations or constructive feedback on how to improve, how to move this district forward together. And I'm looking forward to that. But I want to emphasize that if you have individual, if you want more evidence, I would be more than happy to sit down with you, go through the evidence on an individual basis or collectively, so that you're able to evaluate me and give me, again, that feedback, so that I can be the superintendent that leads us to higher and higher achievement. Any questions?
Hey, thanks, Dr. Andre. I just want to reiterate something. Part of my discussion with Dr. Andre before we actually had the presentation is the need for us to weave in his goals into this new rubric. So this is the first one. Ideally, each of you, if you have questions especially, you can sit down with him one-on-one or small groups if you're so inclined. And then, quite frankly, if you still think we need another discussion with the main group, we can talk about that in the future. What I don't want to do is just go in cold later on, do an evaluation, and then we're scratching our head because we haven't really thoroughly looked at how his goals are weaved into it and his accomplishments, and then we're looking on top of that, our own goals as it's weaved into that whole process too. So this is really the first time we're now introducing his evaluation. So, okay, good.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I ask the superintendent one more question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Superintendent Andre, my question is, I think you mentioned needy families. Is that what you said?
Most neediest families. Yeah.
Okay, so is that because they're economically disadvantaged, or is it the fact that of the student is not where the student should be? Which is it?
It's Title I and Title III, so it could be free and reduced families or ELL students, their families.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
Yes,
question?
please, go ahead.
Madam Superintendent, do you have a timeline for when the superintendent's evaluation is at to come from the personnel? Do we know when we're actually will be doing the evaluation?
Right, traditionally it's at the end of the school year, but I need to speak with the personnel chair.
No, I think traditionally it's,
No, I don't think it's the end of the school
it's
year.
now, I think, or around now, because, we always seem to want to be able to have an evaluation done. And I can't remember, it's actually in the policy.
Since the April business meeting.
April business meeting,
discusses the
okay.
results of the evaluation.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, so it's a month before the end of the year. It's just traditionally, I remember being at the budget, we go right into the evaluation process. So yeah, April.
Okay.
April, when we evaluate or when it is done?
It's done.
That's when
It's done.
That's right.
The March business meeting is when it's distributed, the evaluation instrument. All evaluations are due 10 days prior to the April business meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, what I'm looking at, I was thinking April and May. But April.
April, because then we discuss.
Yep, totally understand. Okay. Any other questions on this? Okay, hang on a second.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to the next part of our agenda, or if you would, Ms. Lynch. Well, I guess we can go straight to the recommendation.
Recommendation BWRS 2016-06 personnel.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Motion
Second.
made by Mr. McBride, second by Ms. Lynch. Discussion.
Can I ask a question? I know that these are done because there's a timeline, right, for tenured teachers for later and non-tenured teachers earlier. Is that, I know you wrote this in an email, and I'm trying to refresh my memory after earlier tonight. I'm sorry I'm being dense, but can you refresh?
Yeah, so there's a March 1st notification if we're going to terminate for cause, and if it's June 1st now, if it's for budgetary programming. So this is,
It's not a termination for cause, just to clarify that.
No, I didn't think
It's
so.
if it's for financial reasons, the legislation has been changed to allow for a June 1st date, but for a non-tenured teacher, if the termination standard is simply that the superintendent believes he or she can do better, if that's the reason, the sole reason, it's not financial, the March 1 day still applies.
I understand. So it's always possible that when we get to the end of the year, that this can be rescinded at some point. And there's always that possibility, because this is really the notification that's done per legal reasons. Correct?
That's correct. And we have a history of hiring back some teachers that we've given notification on March 1st, and when we went out for a search, that person reapplied for the position and actually was the most qualified.
So in the past, when we gave out 80 or 90 of these termination notices, because the law said it had to be done by March 1st or something, the law has been changed so that non-tenured is now and tenured is later. Is that correct?
So we still have the same categories. So we have the non-tenured categories, and there might have been the way that we always did it, but the 80 or 90 also included financial reasons. That's the part that Mr. Hennius just alluded to. We're back to June 1st, but in that first round, we always had 3 or 4 teachers that were in this category. So this is not a new practice.
My son, crazy
Can
sound.
you use a different mic?
Yeah.
You want mine?
I just know if it was because we had both of ours on at the same time.
Yeah, no,
It's
Go ahead, try it
there's
again.
there's one screwed up one, I think.
Yeah.
It's a draw.
Oh, I got it this time.
I had it last time.
So my question is, this is the first time that I have been in the position of hearing a teacher who comes before us and is,
Pleading for case.
pleading her case, thank you. And so I have this packet in front of me, as we all do, and I'm wondering, it seems like there isn't time at the moment to really look through it. And it sounds like the deadline for this is March 1st notification. Is it something that could be pushed to our next business meeting, which occurs in February, or is that not a possibility?
So what you're asking is if we potentially table this one person for a vote at a later time and still make the suspense of 1 March and go forward with the other 2 to vote on?
Well, I don't even know if that's typically something that would be done, so that's my first question. And my second, I guess my comment to follow that up would be that here's a person who took the time to come plead her case, and then when I briefly glanced over the materials she gave us and the time I had to do that, I can see improvement. And so I would have questions based on what I saw there, I guess.
You know what, I think if you don't mind, Andrew, if you can at least just talk about the process, because I know we're not supposed to get into too much detail.
Sure.
Please.
To answer the question that you raised, Aaron, could it be continued to next week and potentially comply with the statute? Yes, it could, as long as the notice is given out before March 1. However, if you have a snow date or something else, there's no exception. That is a hard and fast rule, which is why this body has traditionally done these at the workshop to allow for a cushion because of weather or anything else. Secondly, Secondly, again, I would draw your attention to what the standard is. And the standard for a non-renewal of a non-tenured teacher is not for just cause. It's simply that the superintendent believes that he or she could do better. If this individual or any individual had 4s across the board on their evaluation, that's still not a defense, quote unquote, to a non-renewal of a non-tenured teacher. If the superintendent believes they could do better, that's the legal standard.
But she's already received the notice, right?
No, it's notice of an act, it's notice of an action by this body. She received notice of the hearing tonight, but this body has to take action, and then she has to receive notice of that on or before March 1st.
Thank you.
And she can apply for the job in the spring if she wants to, right?
That would be correct.
Yep, no, we have. Okay, any other questions in this discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Okay, motion made to adjourn, seconded by Mrs. McBride, seconded by Mrs. Campbell. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?